Hello, my name is Michael Anderson, and this is the podcast from two grumpy old men on Ukraine. Every summer, my fellow grumper Brian Bonner, who for 14 years edited the Kyiv Post and has lived in Ukraine pretty much for the past 3 decades, goes back to see his family and friends in his homeland, the good old United States of America. Last summer, Brian reported back to us how the Americans look at Ukraine and the war and their own role. And I decided to repeat this exercise this year, so here is old Bonner's impressions from the summer of 2025 of Americans and Trump and Ukraine, of baseball and higher prices and MAGA talk radio, and how it feels to be coming back to Kyiv under heavy Russian bombardment.
Oh, I had a great 9-week 6-state tour, golfed badly in every state except for Nebraska, where I didn't golf, or else I would have golfed badly there. One was in Florida, but the rest were in the Midwest, so I spent hours in a rental car, driving thousands of miles around the Midwest to different friends and relatives. And I decided to do something different. I decided not to listen to news in my usual liberal bubble, and I went deliberately for the right-wing talk radio MAGA crowd because I wanted to understand particularly why they were pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian. As near as I can tell, they resent Ukraine for getting all the money that should be going to Americans. They do view it as just another deep state war that we shouldn't be getting into. The most extreme view Ukraine as a CIA regional way station. And oddly, and I don't know how this pierces through, but they view Russia under Putin, Kremlin, as a bastion of conservative Christian values and the ultimate anti-woke. And they have sympathy for what they view as NATO's encroachment and the threats that they believe the Kremlin is responding to. So that was kind of in a nutshell the nonsense that goes on like that.
But I mean, we should of course stress here that the views you just referred to are the MAGA views on the MAGA talk radio shows. This is tell me a little bit more about sort of like when you talk to people who are not in love with Donald Trump. I mean, how do you see this compared to, when you went back to the U.S. last summer? I mean, is Ukraine still sort of widely a debated topic? Do people follow what goes on in Ukraine? I'm not talking about just MAGA crowd here. I'm talking about sort of general. When you talk to family, friends, people in the street, in the cafes, whatever, do they know what goes on?
Yeah, but I mean, I think, and I'll have to steal a line from Stefan Korshak, who I used to work with at the Kyiv Post. He said it's like you and I talking about the weather in Antarctica. We know it's unpleasant, but it's happening to other people and not us. And that's kind of the way people get into the discussion. There's still a broad support for Ukraine, but America's moved on to other roiling issues. I mean, I'm sorry to report that even on so-called Christian radio networks, there is almost unfailing support of whatever Trump does, hatred of whatever the Democrats do. It's still as divisive and as polarized as ever. What I'm watching for is how Trump's recent shift, how real it is. Already MAGA acolytes like Marjorie Taylor Greene are opposing helping Ukraine. And also, he's losing people through this Jeffrey Epstein files controversy, and he's losing people on the economy, and he's losing people on immigration because he's resurrecting a police-type state with huge budget increases for jails and prisons and militarizing domestic law enforcement and having mask shows and mask raids. It's all theatrical as he is. And, into all this domestic turmoil, Ukraine still has to somehow win. There's good news there also. Go to Fox News, play that clip with Lindsey Graham on Sunday night. He's got it. He's very close to Trump, golf partners and all that stuff. He was talking unequivocally that Putin is going to get an ass whipping, that he's going to regret that he crossed Trump, that Putin's time is coming, his turn is next, and he'd better get to the negotiating table and stop attacking Ukraine. Now, we'll see how much bite there is. And he's also put China, India, and Brazil on notice that he's going to crush their economies if they continue to buy Russian oil, because they're just supporting the war with blood money. And we'll see. I still doubt if Trump has the stomach to roil the oil markets by imposing tough tariffs.
If I can play, Danish devil's advocate here, I mean, Lindsey Graham, let's not forget that he was in the almost opposite camp just a year ago and was, sucking up to Trump in many ways, but also he has actually been shouting at Putin since May that, this would be a game changer, that he would whip his ass and whatever. But also the other thing is, one reading of this could also be that Trump basically is neutralizing the sanction proposals in the Senate. And also Graham has several times said, we want to give the president this tool. Not that they're going to force it through, we're going to give Trump this tool.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham is not to be trusted. You're right about that. And they riddled the sanctions bill with Trump opt-out. It's like they're passing a law that's optional for Trump to follow or not follow. It's absurd, and we still haven't seen backbone from the Republicans. We will, the more they feel threatened in the midterm elections that are coming up in 2026. And here's another thing to point you to. Frederick Kemp of the Atlantic Council is saying, actually getting tough on Putin fits with Trump 2.0. Here's why. People thought he'd be taco on Iran. He struck Iran. People thought he would maintain a relentless war on Europe. He played nice at the NATO summit and talked about, how great the alliance is now. And it's still shameful and immoral that he is not also putting up U.S. money and weapons, and he's making Europe buy it. But under his Trump 2.0 MAGA America First view, if he can get the Europeans to fund this war, then he transfers the weapons to Europe and they pay for it, and whatever Europe does with it is fine. Maybe that's the only way it has to go, but it seems still like an abdication of moral leadership. You're right there, and Europe is, if you look at the fights over money, Europe is not swimming in cash, and I expect pressure, but yet they're not doing anything about the 300 billion, or they're not seizing the entire 300 billion that is going to pay for everything. And I have no idea why they're still dawdling on that issue. And Europe, one final thing. Europe talks a great game of strategic independence, but Frederick Mersch just told BBC we're defenseless. So, Europe has a long, long way to go. They can start by buying all the weapons in whatever way possible, and they don't need to borrow. They just need to take Russian money.
Well, I've heard a couple of people suggesting that instead of Europe buying weapons from Mr. Trump and the people who support him, maybe it would be better to spend that money on developing weapons in Ukraine. And I think that's a pretty good point, and I'm actually looking into that. But I agree with you that Europe is talking a better game than we're playing. Merz is one example. I think the worst example is Keir Starmer from the UK, who is all gung-ho about, helping Ukraine, and we will be, overlooking a ceasefire and so on. And then he always adds, but it all has to be under the American security umbrella. And Trump has said, there is no American security umbrella. It doesn't exist. It won't exist. So basically what Keir Starmer is saying is that, yeah, we're not going to do anything. It's absolutely free to say we will do all this, Ukrainians, we're with you all the way, if America protects us. And America said that's not going to happen. So since we talked last summer, where we were looking at, are Americans interested in Ukraine? What do they know? What don't they know? And so on. Of course, we had this momentous Oval Office meeting. And I heard a lot of friends. I got a lot of messages from friends in America, American friends, mainly on the left, people working in NGO, international journalists and so on. And they were all like, oh, we're so embarrassed by this guy, this Trump guy, this is terrible. Please, accept our apologies and so on and so forth. I want to hear from you, does this meeting, this attack on the Ukrainian president, is this such a mythical thing in the American psyche as it is in not just Ukrainian psyche, but I don't think you can find any European who doesn't know about this and was disgusted. Does this still live in the US psyche?
Well, yeah, it's embarrassing to those who are paying attention and who are inclined to support Ukraine, which is still a majority of Americans, but it's not as intense as in Europe, where people like Lech Walesa and others were just outraged. I mean, pretty much across the board in Europe was outraged. But I mean, Trump is an equal opportunity hater, and you can't keep up with him. I mean, what he said, what he did to Zelensky was horrible, but what he does and says every day is horrible too. And he's winning in some ways because he's suing media outlets that would rather, on very flimsy grounds, but they would rather, because they need business, they need mergers approved, they want to avoid Trump's line of fire, they're settling. I mean, it's just absurd.
Are Americans, by and large, do you think, are they aware of the enormous effect that their president, in this case Donald Trump, has on Ukraine? I mean, for me, one of the most striking weeks in these 3.5 years of war was in the beginning of March, immediately after the Oval Office attack on Zelensky and the fallout, and Trump cut off intelligence sharing. And according to a lot of different sources, hundreds of Ukrainians died from that simply because they couldn't defend themselves against the Russian incoming bombs. And again, now we have the Patriot debacle with Hexet, and now Trump changing, or apparently changing his mind. I mean, are Americans talking about, and do Americans know that when the president makes such a off-the-cuff decision, stop the intelligence sharing, or let's not send them any weapons, do they know, do they talk about, are they interested in the fact that that actually physically, concretely cost lives in Ukraine?
Well, they do. Intellectually, they do, and they understand that. And there's a lot of, there's a reason why Europe continues to be subservient and has to muffle its, we're going to do strategic autonomy. They look around at their weapons pile and realize that, we don't have the intelligence apparatus America does. We actually don't have anything that works as well as the Patriots. So they go on, and that limits their independence. So Trump plays that, and he can do kind of whatever he wants. But again, I say but because I was in the heart of America in red state territory. Most Americans remain concerned about domestic issues. They get up early just judging from my friends and relatives, they get up early in the morning, those who are still in the workforce and not retired. They walk their dogs, they have, they take their kids to go to softball games and baseball games. They're really consumed with what is getting to be an increasingly expensive America to live in. And that's the way it is. Prices have moderated a bit, housing has moderated a bit, but all those issues are, will always decide elections. Ukraine will never decide an election. It could help tip things, in favor of those who strongly support Ukraine. I think the pro-MAGA isolationist wing is being marginalized, but we'll see for how long.
Yeah, this is very interesting you mentioned that, because I actually wanted to you last year mentioned that we didn't know where what would happen after the elections last summer. Of course, we were waiting for the elections, and you outlined these three versions, and we didn't know which one. We thought we knew that if Kamala Harris would have won, she would probably have continued the middle of the road version that Joe Biden has, sort of keep Ukraine in the fight, but don't give them enough arms to win. Then that was one. The other one was isolation, and the third one was the hawkish approach of give Ukraine everything it needs to win the war and beat Russia. And I find it. I was listening back on our talk from 12 months ago, and it struck me that 12 months down the line, we still don't know. Is America taking the isolationist? Are they taking the middle of the roads, giving enough weapons for Ukraine to survive? Is it doing the hawkish? I mean, where do you see Trump going?
Unfortunately, I don't see him going to the direction he needs to go, which is hawkish. And other people, like at the Aspen Security Conference, Condoleezza Rice called him out on that, but she also called out Biden, rightly, for delaying key weapons shipments and limiting weapons, types of weapons, and how they could be used. She's of the view, and I am too, and I think you are too, that the tide could have been turned very early on in the war when Russia was on the defensive had we flooded the zone in Ukraine. And I can tell you, I watched it. I was relieved and guilty at the same time to watch safely from America the ramp up. And last night was and I've only been back a few nights, it was the worst night I can remember in a very, very long time. Now I'm high up on the floor, and so I don't know. I mean, it feels like the Shaheeds and the missiles are like right out my window. It was hours, multiple hours. And I did not go to the shelter. I did not stay in bed, however. It was so loud and continuous that I just had to move to the closet. I don't know if that would help me, but maybe it would help if there was just glass shrapnel or something like that. We're going to get it. I mean, German intelligence, Ukrainian intelligence say Russia's going to be able to do 2,000 a day pretty soon by their ramping up of their productions. And Ukraine is already woefully inadequate at intercepting missiles. Financial Times has a story today saying the success rate of hits, in other words, is going up in the drone warfare. Interception rate is going down by Ukrainians. On the flip side, Ukraine is not defenseless. Economist has a story saying Ukraine's drones are more lethal than ever too, whereas they would kill 50 Russian soldiers a day. Now they're killing 250 Russian soldiers a day. So you see where this war is going, and it's not going in a great place. We're getting hammered, and I expect we're going to keep getting hammered every single night all over the country, particularly in Kyiv.
They're pounding the shit out of Ukraine. I mean, these numbers. Looked at an old long article the other day, and at that point, when Russia could fire sort of 70, 80 missiles and drones and so a day, it was like one or two came through and hit something. Most of them were shot down. I mean, sometimes they would shoot down, intercept all of them, and nothing would actually land anywhere. And now it's less than half. And sometimes it's not even that. I mean,
the number of missiles and drones and their rising success rate in terms of hitting something is really, really a bad prescription, because over time, they're going to hit more and more targets, even secondary targets or peripheral targets, just to terrorize us. So that we're heading in that direction. I had hoped that Ukraine had a reserve of interceptors and anti-missile defenses that they were going to now that they've been holding back because they were worried about rationing supply. I had hoped that they would started using them, but it looks like from last night's attack, a lot of things got through.
I don't know, for a year now, people have been writing about, Ukraine drone industry, it's exploding and they're so good and they're so inventive. And I'm sure that's true and it's impressive. But only the last couple of weeks, somebody has been starting writing, as you said, the FT this morning. But it's only the last 2-3 weeks. The same thing happens on the Russian side, and it looks like they're actually having more success with it. Even though, we're all applauding the Ukrainians, and the Danes are now supporting the Norwegians, the Swedes as well. This thing of supporting drone development in Ukraine, which is great. But it's like we've forgotten that the Russians are not useless on these things. They may be useless on most things, but clearly not this. And we're now in a fight where Putin's drones are hitting you in your bed in Kyiv, while the Ukrainian drones are going for infrastructure, which may be clever, but also because they don't want to kill Russians as such. But then it's a question of, will Putin give up first because his infrastructure is being hit, or will the Ukrainians give up first because they themselves are being hit?